Excellent question. So we have money for the first 2 years. Obviously, the McKaylee Center for Sports Injury Prevention would also kick in resources to try to maintain that should the money fall short. But the ultimate goal would be to start small, just with the third grade, collect data on them, see over the year, and again, this is purely observational, so there's no intervention. We're not giving them a plan or training anything they're doing. We're just watching and observing what happens. And then use that data to apply for funding to sort of expand the study. I would say even without additional funding, the McKaylee Center staff could keep this running for an additional 3 years after the first 2 that are funded in all likelihood. And so you're looking at 5 years before we would really have to be at risk for ending early.
Great.
That's a good question.
Other questions from the board? Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Livingston.
No, start down there. Start down there.
Okay. So, Mr. Teresi, would you like to?
Oh, I'm sorry. Andrew's next.
No, you can go.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess just for a point of process, though, why we're meeting a joint session. Are you trying to look for a vote tonight? Is there a joint vote between the both?
This is my understanding is this is informational only. There has not been a formal ask or contractual review request. So from my perspective, this is really an opportunity to understand, are there any red flags, any impediments that would say we're not interested in going further, or find out what the next step would be. That's my read.
Does anyone have any, Mr. Manager, Mr. Superintendent? Madam Superintendent, sorry. I mean, do they need school committee approval to go forward with this, or town approval to go through this? I mean, I appreciate you talking to both boards. I think it's a great way to start, because there's going to be some overlap between the town and the school involvement here. But
so at this point, we do not believe that we're going to need anything right now. We may need some school committee approval moving forward if we are going to work collaboratively with the McKaylee Center in terms of our nurses, et cetera. But we'd have to figure all that out.
Okay, so let's think about that. Andrew, we'll go to you next.
I really just have 2 quick questions, but all of the data that's being stored, is that being stored kind of within Children's? Is that, all bound by HIPAA? Any complications with any of that?
Yep, it's a great question. So all the data would be kept confidential. It would be stored on a server that's at the McKaylee Center for Sports Injury Prevention. It is not covered by HIPAA because it's not health-related information. They're not seeing us as patients. However, the system is set up with the same restrictions. So even though it's not technically or legally covered by HIPAA, the data would be protected in the exact same way.
Okay. So there's no real testing that's being done of the students. It's more observation. There's no taking blood samples or any of that.
No, although, so there would be a subset that would come to the McKaylee Center for Sports Injury Prevention. They would be tested. They would have their physical fitness tested. They would have a measure of their cognition, their memory, reaction time, processing speed, things like that. At the center, we would measure sort of the angles their bones make and some other things that are increased risk of sports injury prevention.
Okay.
We might in the future, but again, this would be if people were open to it, ask for perhaps saliva samples or something. We wouldn't do blood because children sort of don't like that and it is invasive. But saliva samples can give you a lot of information that could be used in the future. But up front, we're not asking for anything like that.
Okay. Those are my top 2. So.
Thank you. Could you just walk us through how, suppose we go forward and you get your approvals, get the votes from this board or that board. Tell me, how do you start and what's the process of notifying parents and opting in, opting out, everything?
Yep, it's a great question. So initially we would start by just reaching out to the community. So coming to festivals during the summer and athlete registration days and be sort of available to answer questions, things like that. The beginning of the study, parents would be given information about the study and a consent form that would say if they wanted to do it, they could consent in. If they didn't, then they wouldn't be a part of it. The initial, especially the first year or so, would consist of a questionnaire about sports that they play, injuries they've had in the past, other activities that they do, music and things that might be comparable as far as scheduling. Some would be asked if they would like to be part of the subset that comes to the McKaylee Center for the assessments or not. And then periodically throughout the year, we would measure the practices they participate in, the games they participate in, who was injured. When they were injured, we would reach out to contact them to find out about their injury. And we would also try to track school absences and performance in school. As time went on and we got more people involved, the measurements might change, and each one of those, to get back to the original question, would have to file an amendment to the IRB, and then again, back to the population, the parents and the athletes to ask, is this something you'd be interested in or not?
So is this a K through 12? Are you jumping with everyone right away?
No, in fact, one of the reasons is you can start smaller with smaller and then expand as time goes on. So ideally, we would enroll the third graders every year. So we still follow this year's third graders when they're in fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, but every year we try to enroll the new third grade class and follow them as they get older.
And that's when we start third grade.
Yes, that's the proposal anyway.
And are you like identifying the athletes, or are you identifying even the non-athletes too?
Even the non-athletes.
How would you identify the non-athletes? Because I think it's easy to get roster lists from the booster club or the town, but like, how would you?
Through the schools. So the same way we would show up at the beginning of the school year, we'd be there at registration, we would have meetings where we could come and talk to parents, answer any questions they have, explain anything they have, and see if they're willing to participate.
What's the pitch to the parents? Why should I let my kid participate in this?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's different depending on who you are. So I think many of the parents are trying to make the decision about sports. And so the real pitch is, wouldn't it be great if you had some real data as opposed to just not knowing and people saying sports are good or sports are bad or you might get injured or, that you should participate. For the non-parents whose kids chose not to participate in sports, the pitch would be similar except that we're trying to compare to another population. So it could be that we draw the comparison between musicians, which has been brought up in the past because they have a similar schedule, they have practices and things like that go along with it. Ideally, we would have all the third graders, and then we could sort of sort it out in the analysis.
And lastly, I know Dr. Price had mentioned a few weeks ago at one of our other school committee meetings that she had a relationship with you folks. Besides, and she's doing a great job of it.
That's the word.
Besides North Andover, besides that connection, why North Andover? Because I'm sure you must have connections with a lot of different schools.
We do, and it was mostly for the reasons I stated. Number one, there's a much stronger sense of community and sort of a closer knit. Number two, there's already a focus on athletics. The school nurses are involved in all aspects of the child's health. It's a population that tends to stay in touch over time, and as technology gets better and kids move away or go off to college, we think we'd be able to follow them, similar to what they did in Framingham, although I think North Andover would be more comparable to what Framingham was back in the day as far as its size and sense of community. If this group here was not interested in pursuing further, you're absolutely right, we would have to look at other towns. Right now, this is the town that rose to the top of the list, and so we'd have to start from scratch.
So there's really no other, besides, could we talk to the people would Framingham be a good town to talk to as far as your reputation and your involvement in the schools? And I'm just trying to think, are we like the first in the nation? Are we the first in the state? Are we?
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to.
In this age group, we are. So there is a study that I've also collaborated with that's now run out of Colorado, used to be out of Ohio, that deals with high schools. The advantage of high schools, of course, is that many of them have an athletic trainer right there in the high school. And the athletic trainers are given a stipend to keep track of this data, who got injured and what sports it was and how many days they missed and how are they managed and all that kind of stuff. Ideally, we would love to do that in this age group and have it nationwide like the one is for high schools. Problem is there isn't athletic trainers associated with most of the sports for kids at the younger age group, and there's really just no way to do it nationally that we can find. The one exception to that would be going to boarding schools. The problem there is boarding school students very different than other students, including the sports that they participate in, the resources they have, et cetera. That's why they have athletic trainers there. They have more resources. So it wouldn't really be generalizable to the rest of the population. So our idea is that taking a town like North Andover, where it's just given its size, the sort of community spirit, the organization of it, the involvement of the school nurses and stuff, that we could accomplish it on this level and use it as an estimate as to what might be going on in other parts of the country.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
No?
Sorry.
Okay, sure. So I know you had asked a question about how you would get students' names. I'm assuming that you would just we'd share information out, but we would not be sharing rosters, right, from sports teams or from the schools. Is that right?
Our plan is to go, sorry. Our plan is to go directly to the parents. So basically, we would hold a meeting that the school would come to. We would do it at both, well, several schools anyway. We would be there at the field days, at the registration days, and everything else with a booth, and we would ask people to participate. But we're not asking to get any rosters or personal information from
So
anyone.
we would be publicizing this and talking about it and trying to get people to
Ideally,
encourage to do
yeah.
it. And then once somebody was in,
Right.
we would need to talk very carefully about what information we would share with parent consent. But we would actively work with you guys to try to get folks to participate in this, but
No, of
not.
course, but it's all opt-in.
Yes,
It's all
opt-in.
opt-in. And we're planning to go both public schools and Catholic schools.
Okay, great. And then you had mentioned that at practices, you would have people who would be hired from your group to monitor, like, who's at practices, who got injured, but they would only track data for children who were opted in.
That's
They
right.
would not be tracking data on other children.
Yep, ideally be a parent in the study who has a list of people who were part of the study. Were they at practice? Were they at the game? Did they get injured?
Okay, excellent. And then in terms of like missing school, that would be again by parents giving that data, that would not be reported out from the schools.
Exactly, yeah. So the way the study coordinator, the person responsible every week would contact the people involved and just say, did you miss any school? If so, what was the reason?
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The only question I have, Dr. Meehan, is what's the benefit to North Andover? I understand the benefit of studying concussions at many ages.
Yeah.
What's the direct benefit to our town in our participation in the study? What do we get out of it?
Yeah, I would say it's more indirect, really. So I think it would be more sort of publicity for the town, particularly the town athletics. As you heard, everybody refers to the Framingham cohort as the Framingham cohort. They are credited with discovering that smoking is associated with lung cancer as well as heart disease and stroke and diabetes, and the fact that exercise reduces your risk of those things, obesity associated with those, et cetera. My hope is that in the future people would refer to the North Andover Child Wellness Study as showing the benefits of exercise and the relatively small risk of injury in sports compared to older athletes.
Are there any of the services that you provide in this particular concussion that we might be able to avail ourselves of sort of on a pro bono basis because we're your study cohort?
I doubt that I would get that past the IRB. It would be seen as sort of enticing people to enter the study for reasons other than just true voluntary, which is what you need people to do. I will say, however, the McKaylee Center for Sports Injury Prevention has an enormous scholarship fund, and so even if you choose not to participate in this study, if you know athletes that you think might benefit from it but can't afford it, simply send them to us. We have never turned an athlete away, and I'm hoping to keep that going.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we'll come to this side of the room then. So a lot of the questions that I had have already been asked with respect to the opt-in. I think I would like to reiterate Andrew's concern or question around confidentiality of the data. Obviously, that's of a primary concern when you're collecting data on students, and you know, that data could somehow become public, but we want to make sure that that wouldn't happen. The other question I'd have is around, I think I would discourage having parents collecting data on the sidelines about kids who are there and not there. I think that, I don't know, to me that would be viewed as a little awkward. I would more rely on, I think, parents providing that data to you as you would for absences and such. If they're out for an injury, I think they, you know, if they're in the study, they should be providing that data or someone reaching out to them. But certainly I would be a little leery about people sitting on the sideline collecting data on kids. I don't know how that would be viewed. And then finally, also, as a former member of the Booster Club, I know for a fact they wouldn't be providing roster lists to anybody. So those are my comments, no specific questions. I think a lot of great questions have already been asked, so I don't have any additional questions.
That's great. So just to address the confidentiality, give you an idea how it works. So all the studies that we do coming into this problem, as you might imagine, they are protected. The data is protected in several ways. Number one, all the data is saved de-identified. So the athlete's name is not associated with the data. Their name is associated with a code. It's that code that's associated with the things that we measure, and only if ever you needed to. Say an athlete was discovered to have some health problem that maybe they weren't aware of just by chance, you might break the code in order to give them that information. But other than that, you keep them separate. When it's presented or published, it's aggregate data, so you don't see anything about anybody particular, and all the data that they might be used to identify somebody has been removed. As I said, it's stored on a server that's protected by the same protections we use for HIPAA protection. The parents on the sideline, certainly that's negotiable. That was something that came up in sort of the earlier meetings. People said, parents might be interested in doing this. They might collect the data. It might be something that would generate community support and things like that. At the same time, if the community was uncomfortable with it, said we didn't want that, it'd be easy enough for us to have research coordinators check in with the teams weekly, or even come out here and sort of take the roster list. Another way to do it, although this would be the first instance where we sort of did use some of the town resources, would be to have a list that the coaches have. They checked off absent or present. We would rather not do that. I mean, I think it's something that the coaches don't enjoy doing. It's extra time and already sort of packed practice schedule. And for reliability reasons, we'd like to have someone designated to do it. But I think we'd be open to making it not parents if people would rather. And then the last one is, the roster. Yeah, we are not asking for rosters or a list or any kind.
It just doesn't seem to be like there's any comfortable way to collect that attendance data and then pass it on to somebody else. But that's my own preference, my own personal opinion. But I'm sure, we all have our opinions.
Yeah, and we should, I should make sure that everybody's comfortable with it. I will say most of the cohort studies are done that way. All the ones on athletes have been done that way, and it has not been raised before. But it's not parents usually. It's usually an athletic trainer, and so maybe we should reconsider the way we propose doing it.
Thank you all for coming this evening. First off, I'd like to thank you for all the very kind and generous and rather exciting things you've said about our town, and I'm sure everyone in this room agrees with it. It's something of an honor that we have been a town chosen because of our spirit and sense of purpose on things of this importance, and it is an important study. I wasn't sure I heard you correctly. Did you say you will also be working with children of the Catholic school like St. Michael's?
We plan to approach all the third graders in the town.
Okay. Have you reached out to St. Michael's yet, or is that this first and that would be after?
Yeah, I think if this group was not interested, we probably wouldn't reach out to them. If this group is interested, we would.
Okay. Now, will this be for just North Andover children who reside in North Andover? Because, of course, Catholic school, they do come from other communities. Have you decided that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, for St. Mike's, it would be children who attend St. Mike's, even if they reside outside of North Andover. Our understanding is that's a relatively small proportion, but still we would include them.
Okay. The other thing that you might have said it, and perhaps I missed it. So what is the process if the town decides for whatever reason we need to opt out? We would hate to be that disruptive to your study, but
I would say that's okay. No,
but what if it just wasn't working for us any longer?
Then we would pursue another community. and try and get it done somewhere else. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not, no plans have been made yet, no, there's no commitment on behalf of the town. The first step was to approach Dr. Price and see if she thought if anybody be interested. Second step, we reached out to some of the athletic organizations, school nurses and other people who said, yeah, I think that the town might be interested. And then this is the third step. And if people here are not interested, we will go our way and no hard feelings. And if people are interested, we pursue it further.
I would just like to comment that a number of the folks that we talked about are in the audience here, the school nurses,
I see
Rick Gorman from the Youth Center,
Dr. Chan,
athletic trainer, and that was the first group that we said, is this something of interest? Because that's the group that's really going to impact, and their attendance tonight is a demonstration that they thought it would be a good thing for our town.
Now, I agree this probably requires further questioning and discussion, but on the surface, it really appears to be a very exciting and important study. And
thank you.
Again, thank you again for bringing it to our town.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming before us. Assuming that you got the green light and you were 100% on board, what's your target date for when this would begin?
Yeah, it's ambitious. So if we got the green light relatively soon, we would prepare the IRB, get permission from the IRB to proceed, and that entails turning in all the questionnaires and that kind of thing. We would hope to attend events over the summer, including athletic registration, school registration, field days, etc., and ideally try to start in September. If for some reason we missed that deadline, we had to make amendments for the IRB or other things, we would shoot for January.
And what's the minimum number of students you want participating?
It's a great question. Our understanding is there's about 400 if you include St. Mike's, maybe a little more than that, third graders. Ideally, we would get about 60, 75% of them to agree.
I'm sorry, can you say that? What was the number again?
It'd be about 60 to 75% of the eligible, which would be the third graders between the public school and St. Mike's.
Just out of curiosity, because you seem really ambitious with this project, what's the annual investment into this study?
Right now, it's $125,000 a year for 2 years, and all the resources of the McKaylee Center, which includes 10 full-time staff. 2 of those are PhD researchers. There's an associated 17 physicians, almost all of whom are involved in clinical research. And then for the assessment of the center, there's 7,400 square feet of space and lots of machinery and bioassessments, computer technology, statisticians, et cetera.
And so this study, in order for it to be successful, requires parents to be fairly involved, though, right? Because, of course, they have to opt in. So how are you going to work with students who might not have parents that are as involved or can't be as involved? Because wouldn't that skew this study?
It would. No, it's a great question. And so part of what we spend our resources on is developing this sense of being a part of the study. These are lessons that were learned actually from the Framingham study. Not only do people opt in, we ask them to make a commitment up front. So if they say, look, they won't be able to respond to the questionnaires at time intervals that we ask, and usually it's maybe twice a year we ask them to dedicate a decent chunk of time, often an hour to 90 minutes the first time, then maybe a half hour the second time. If they really feel like they can't do it, then they are taken off the eligible list. Those who are doing it, we send them birthday cards, we send them baseball hats and stuff saying, I'm part of the North Andover Child Wellness Study. We call them periodically to see if they have any questions, any problems, if there's things we could do to further motivate them. We plan to show up at all the town and school events and even some of the big games and stuff, put out a table, again, encouraging them to participate. Still, you're going to lose people. That happened in Framingham. That happens in the football players' house study and the other cohorts we have. We try to keep it to a minimum. If you lose less than 15%, it's unlikely that it's going to bias your sample in a substantial way. If you lose more than that, you have to do some tricky statistics so that you don't overgeneralize your estimates.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm good. Stuart, any questions? Okay. Any additional questions from the
One follow-up question, if I could. For those students who do choose to take advantage of the McKaylee Center, would that be at the rates, or would that be subsidized by the study?
Not by the study. So that would be the study would be completely separate from any of the services at the McKaylee Center, just so that we're not trying to unduly influence people to be a part of the study. However, if the rates are a problem, we just give people a scholarship, so they don't pay a penny if they can't do it. The McKaylee Center, I should take a step back. It is technically the Children's Sports Medicine Foundation doing business as the McKaylee Center. Both entities are a nonprofit. It's basically funded by the physicians at the Children's Sports Medicine Foundation. Our scholarship fund has a large amount of money. Like I said, we've never turned anybody away, and I don't foresee us turning anyone away for a long time.
Okay.
By the way, just as if North Andover decides not to go forward with the study, still, please send us the athletes. Like I said, we're sort of happy to do it. That's a fact. Yeah.
So I think it's well worth our attention. I guess fundamentally, how do you envision the relationship between the town and the foundation would be solidified? Is there a memorandum of understanding? Is there an indemnification you would be issuing for the town? How do you envision that?
Yeah, not really. I mean, we're reaching out mostly to the parents involved. We would also like to involve the school nurses, and so that part we would have to negotiate. I think if the group decided tonight, look, we're really not interested in going further, that would be the end of it. I think if people were interested, then probably we would come back with some specifics about how we wanted it to go forward with the school nurses. Other than that, we're really asking for your support, and if parents ask about it, you say, oh yeah, we know about it, and it seems like a great thing, and we met this redheaded guy who came and told us all about it, whatever it is.
Yeah, things like cognitive capabilities, that sounds a little like PHI, but I hear what you're saying. Good, thank you.
Any other questions?
How many strokes would you take off my handicap on this car?
So we have a number of people in the audience, and I know a lot of them are administrators and town employees, et cetera. Are there any parents or anyone else, it doesn't have to be parents, that have any questions that haven't already been asked that you'd like to get clarification on, or comments or anything? Just open it up. It's not on the agenda, but I'll give you, since there's so many of you here, give you an opportunity to comment if you'd like.
I had a second grader, and I'm really privileged to meet these folks earlier. And I'd be in full support of enrolling my son next year. I'd still have to check with my wife. But
You have to check with get permission.
probably permission, but I just want to say, when I had met with Rick Gorman and the athletic director and Dr. Chan and the school nurses, the ability for North Andover to be put on the map with something like this, like the Framingham Heart Study, is an opportunity that doesn't come around all that often. And as someone, I also participate, my son had a condition early in life, and I participate in some studies at Children's Hospital where I go. I'll never probably know the outcomes, but I know it's for something better for people down the road. So I go once a year and give blood, and they do a swab my mouth for a particular study I won't get into, but I only see it as a positive thing, and it's a significant investment, money-wise too, into our kids here in North Andover, where they'll follow them, hopefully, for the rest of their lives, if it was successful. So I just wanted to add that, but it's an impressive group, and that's all.
I might have a little something to say. My name is Dr. Kenny Chan. I'm a school physician. I'm also a community pediatrician. And a few things about Dr. Meehan. I mean, he's well respected in the pediatric community. Everyone knows who he is. So you go to his lectures when it comes to sports medicine. He's very well known around the pediatric, nationally as well and internationally. So it's a great opportunity. And the other thing I'd like to say is, North Andover. There's a reason why they picked North Andover, and I can say that from personal experience, being not just a school doctor here, but also a school doctor elsewhere. That I think the school nurses are totally primed. The community is ready to take care of this. I think if they can, give the okay, I think it's a great opportunity and a lot of potential. So he has my full support.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any comments or?
So can we ask if Dr. Rice can identify what next steps would be?
Yeah, I think next steps for this particular study would be some sort of reaction to this group, whether we should continue going forward. We just didn't want to get too far down the road without the leaders of this community saying this is something, yes, keep going. I don't think it's a formal vote. I think it's just a kind of a sense of the group of whether or not we should continue. And as we continue, we would come back to whatever relevant party for any kind of real memorandum that we would need to do. That's my question, and then we'll continue to go or not go. But it felt important to get this group's reaction before we took any more steps.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And thank you for doing the study. I think it's a very important study.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming out, as everyone has said, and reaching out to us. So with that, should we have a motion to just, from the Board of Selectmen, and then you guys can, if you choose to do it, do you think we should have a motion to move forward and to give approval to move forward?
I would formalize it, although it's not binding per se. I think almost like a sense of the meeting or a sense of the committee is important to the folks here, that they're willing to make a pretty significant investment of their time and money in the community, and I think clearly understanding the position of both boards is important.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Board of Selectmen make a motion to move forward further, inclusive of further discussion, to embrace this project.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, you've got unanimous from the Board of Selectmen.
Is there a motion from the school committee to pursue the opportunity to the next stage for either a proposal, formal proposal, or further conversation?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, is there any conversation? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? You have a unanimous decision.
That's unusual. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, just I think you're now going to go and meet with our nurses,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Now that this meeting is, thank you. And quickly, just want to talk for just about 5 minutes about a corollary of this, which is the financial literacy, and I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia Fisher, who is going to quickly explain how we plan to dovetail with this. Great, Cynthia.
Thank you.
And Mark.
Thank you for the opportunity for us to be here tonight, and it's very exciting to hear about your approval for Dr. Meehan's project with Children's Hospital. to just kind of give you the bridge, and probably sitting in the middle here is because I actually also, under full disclosure, have on the advisory board for the McKaylee Center for Sports Injury Prevention. So having been, since the inception of the McKaylee Center, an advisor to them, I've known for years that they were interested in doing a longitudinal study for wellness with children's health, and looking at the physical activity as playing a role for long-term outcomes over decades through their lifetime, like the decades of the Framingham Heart Study. And it was a challenge to think of where. Well, independent of that effort of being engaged with the McKaylee Center, I'm a Newton resident along with Mark Williams. And we had come together to address the challenges of financial literacy for college students, kids even graduating from college, the challenges, and went to Dr. Price to actually be part of a team along with Kathy Choi, who also has an extensive education background, to found an organization called Fit Money. And the whole goal of coming together with our disparate backgrounds, me as an entrepreneur, Dr. Price with her stellar background then when we came together, she was principal of Newton North, and Mark Williams, who's a professor at Boston University, but another bit besides being a great tennis player is that Mark has had an extensive background in the field of banking and finance and risk management, and being an advisor to the Federal Reserve. Mark, you might want to just give a little bit about your background.
Sure. So what happened, very quickly, I had written a book about the financial crisis, and what really struck me was the fact that it wasn't an issue just of bankers taking advantage of neighborhoods, but it really was people had knocks on their doors, and they didn't really understand sometimes they needed to say no. And there was a lack also of a level of financial sophistication. So the thought was, we needed to wed these two things. Banks clearly took advantage of people, but people really didn't have the skill set needed to make good financial decisions. That's on the savings side, that's on the investment side, but also very, very importantly, the educational side, and that is really understanding, sort of a, penny wise, pound foolish, that sort of decision mode process. So we got together over a course, good decisions get made when you have breakfast. So we had breakfast, and we decided to put this together. And this is Fred. And Fred is the character here of Fit Money.
So let me give you a little bit about our mission. So we came together, and I just want to go back to Kathy Choi. Kathy's background has been extensive, working with administering schools and curriculum in schools, and she is a managing editor for a district management school at a long time. And in fact, you would recognize her because she and her sister were the children actresses on Romper Room and Sesame Street. But fast forward to where we are now, we're committed to helping implement K through 12 financial literacy by weaving financial literacy K through 12 into the existing curriculum. And how do we do that? We will plan to engage teachers, students, and their families. Big part of this is bringing the family into the literacy as well. So what we found was teachers themselves actually imposing it and doing our research with teachers said, I need to know this. I need to have it. Could you teach me first? And therein was the commitment that we saw both at the teacher level and then the opportunity within the family level to learn along with the student good financial decision making and empowerment. How do we empower them? We would look to actually help to empower them for looking at the value of work, how to save, and how to make good decisions about what they could afford to buy, what they cannot afford to buy, and the outcomes of those financial decisions throughout the curriculum at age-appropriate levels. So, looking at the ability to the benefits learning by earning, looking at young Susie who could choose to actually be empowered by making an extra $5 by walking a dog, right? Fast forward, what does that mean? Compounded. Maybe by the time she's in high school, she's resourceful enough to realize that if she walks more than one dog at the same time for the neighborhood, she could actually earn more money and have some savings. I don't know if any of you have been looking in the news of late, but in Worcester, I think it's the treasurer, Mara Healy, is it? Has actually, they're piloting in Worcester a program where they will actually give in kindergarten the start of a 529 college savings plan. Now, this doesn't require the child to save along, or doesn't require specific engagement in financial literacy. It's simply, there's been an emphasis in the country to start giving 529 plans starting at kindergarten, one-time program. So one could say, is that an entitlement program? Well, one of the things that we were thinking, along with this with this movement to the college savings plans, is what if Susie made her $5 and she was able to, by the end of kindergarten, just to hypothetically invest $100 in a 529 tax-free, tax-deferred savings plan. So we just decided to show you the net present value of that $100 invested every year, whether it's birthday money, holiday money, earned money, saved. And you can look at the bottom line. The blue line, the pale blue line, is $100 at 3% interest compounded, invested each year in her 529 plan. If you looked at retrospectively the S&P performance of the S&P 500, and the next line is the green line, excuse me, it's the dark blue line. Is that, do I have it? Yeah. Yeah. The dark blue line, or royal blue line, shows you $100 matched at 3%. So if we believe that there are banking programs and other groups that have expressed interest, and to Mark's involvement in banks, the banks are required to invest in community financial literacy.
Yeah, so we think that this is, we talked earlier about the commitment between basically the student and the teacher, and specifically in regard to the parent. But we think that the business community as well, in particular banks, they have it's called Community Reinvestment Act, of course, and we view that they'll have financial incentives to also make contributions to these 529 programs. So we think that this was a very powerful way in which that not only can we demonstrate how you can save and earn more money, but you can also get participation. So we think this is a strong, compelling. I think this is what's so different about this program as well.
So, one of the things is, okay, say the banks don't participate, but say the child invests $100, and somehow they are able to find others within their family or gifting to match another $100. So the blue line actually shows you 3%, the royal blue line shows you 3% at a matched. So they're motivated with a matching program. At the end of high school, they end up with $3,400, essentially. If you looked at the S&P index on the $100, it's the lower green line. It shows you what the performance was in the last 13 years of the S&P, just the child, him or herself, investing $100 a year in their own 529 plan. So they would end up with the retrospective performance of the S&P, $2,100 at the end of high school. You match that with $100. You basically take their 100 and match it with another 100. So you'd have 200 a year going into that 529 plan. At the end of high school, that child would have $4,200, $4,251. Mm-hmm. That can change a trajectory of opportunities and outcomes and empowerment, leaving high school with their own savings in that pocket.
Our view is that there's going to be a body of knowledge, a curriculum in which students will come away with. And obviously, this isn't something for K or first or second, but the idea is these are building blocks.
It's a building block.
To get an understanding of the power of savings.
So this is not necessarily, this is just exemplary of the power of this opportunity. The next slide. So what do we want to do with the goals and objectives is construct a financial literacy curriculum, K through 12, and have it aligned with the current coursework and provide the education for parents and families. Teacher training as well. So the first investment is really the teacher training. And we also believe that assessments are really important. And the advantage of this study is with the collaboration in line with the beginnings of the McKaylee, if the McKaylee Center study were to go underway, that you would have a longitudinal access to a population that would be potentially agreeing to participate in both studies. So what we could do independently as a school system, we can assess the children going into the financial literacy at the beginning of the year through a testing and a simple test at the end of the year. And one of the things that the group has come up with that had a lot of support was also, in addition to these metrics, actually doing rewards. I don't know if any of you ever participated in the Presidential Fitness Award.
Which award?
You remember? No. Remember the Presidential Fitness Award?
Yes.
I think Lyndon Johnson came out with that in 1966, and it went on for years about, you know, the Presidential Fitness Award. But you can imagine having a financial fitness award. And in achievements, being able to also look at these match type
It's
of...
a relationship with money and how to, you know, typically when you think about yourselves, where did you learn that relationship and how to manage money? Did you learn at home, right? Or did you learn at school? Or was it a combination of both? And so this, you know, we feel like this program will increase the opportunities of good lessons being learned.
And I think the key here is it's would be funded through Fit Money, which is a nonprofit, and any time that our teachers would be spending time on this, they would be compensated. So this is not, again, a resource that would be coming out of the North Andover Public Schools. It's an opportunity for us to develop a curriculum that could then, others could model, and it's an opportunity to do so without impacting our town and or school budget.
So the goal would be to start, if we could, and developing a pilot program with the third grade, coincidentally, with the third grade, and to be able to roll it out across all grades eventually over a 3-year time period. And we would look to refine the model based upon the initial pilot and create an adaptable program that could be replicated across the Commonwealth and nationwide. Gathering the metrics and the data is unique because we would also look to having this longitudinal study. So if you think about the power of the longitudinal connection to the North Andover student population over decades of time, one could actually look at comparative outcomes based upon financial decisions and financial well-being long-term. So you're looking at essentially between both of these studies being coordinated and at the same time, you're looking at not only looking at wellness as physical fitness and wellness, but you're also looking at financial wellness and fitness with the same population implemented collaboratively.
Now you're going to let me look at Fit Money. So that's Fred. And if you look closely at
or Jane.
Or Jane, it could be. That's right. If you look closely at his cape, you see the projections and things, value is going up. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's the message that we're trying to send. And it's also someone who, you know, is people can relate to, whether you're in third grade or whether maybe you're going towards high school.
And it's pretty clear that this is I wanted the Board of Selectmen to know about this, and since the connection, but this really is a school committee, school curriculum decision, but I just really felt that given this was a good connection for you guys to understand. It's exciting for North Andover also.
I was remiss to also mention that, you know, there is a community support with the North Andover Community Center, which is also very strong, and that we found was another really great avenue for community engagement.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
No, I mean.
Yes. Yeah, well, it just came in, so I'll send it to you guys.
Thank you.
So can we open the conversation, maybe perhaps start with Mr. Limpert?
It sounds exciting. I think this is a great thing. I think we all need this. So I don't think it's just students. I think it's many of us. I think I'd like to know more about the curriculum, its development, how it all gets fit in there. So that would be the kind of areas where, going forward, maybe we could have more discussions about that and how that would all work. And even if somebody's paying, nonetheless, it takes time, and we don't have a lot of extra time. And no matter who pays, there's just so much time to teach, and so this is one more thing added in there, and we have to figure out how that all works. So,
I think Dr. Price would be best to answer that, and you may want to mention Cynthia Bergen.
Yeah,
too.
so absolutely, I'll bring that back to the school committee. I will tell you that the development of this would be over the summer.
Yeah.
And we have a whole plan on how we would do that, so.
Okay. And I think importantly here, I know we spoke before this started, but the curriculum itself starts, of course, with material, and there's lots of very strong material out there. It's really about putting that material together. So it's not like we're recreating the wheel in regard to the material. I was involved in 2009, 2010, creating for the federal government several bits of material. So, in essence, this is an initiative which is national in the sense that more and more people want this knowledge. It just so happens that, again, we came to North Andover.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Warren?
So I think just questions about the curriculum. I think it'd be great to see an alignment between the curriculum that you're offering with the third grade maths frameworks and what that looks like and how that would be.
Yep, that would be done.
In support of the curriculum. And I know math is an area that's been, I think, pushed off a year in terms of development, so it'd be interesting to see how that fits in. But you mentioned about teachers opting out. I'm just wondering about consistency across the district and what that might look like with the curriculum. And then, have you done this before with third graders?
No, we have not. This would be an initial launching of the program. And, with Dr. Price and there's Cynthia Bergen, who headed New North's math department, did put financial literacy in high school programs there and wove it into the existing curriculum. So we were looking for her guidance she's retired now and has some time that could help us along this with working with the teachers themselves. I think, Dr. Price, you may want to elaborate further on.
Yeah, I think that, the next step for the school committee is we would bring a full curriculum, but I didn't want to drag these guys back for that. That is absolutely coming, and I don't feel the Board of Selectmen, I respectfully, they have the rest of their meeting, we'll get into that.
Sure, and I think my only other thought, and this is exciting, I think this is a great opportunity, is but about the study in the third grade, and I just wonder if there might be any sort of concerns from the community. It'd be good to hear just about all of these studies on this same group of kids and just the comfort there. But I think it's very exciting and a great opportunity for us, so thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tracy?
Yeah, I guess I think Dr. Price hit on this a little bit, but I think the conversation is a little premature right now. I think the board needs to talk about whether we want to have a financial literacy curriculum. I'm sure Fit Money, obviously the overlap between the two boards, this was a convenient way for you to come up and talk about it, but my guess is there's probably other organizations that do financial literacy curriculum as well. And we need to decide, I think, as a group, and I do appreciate that the board's here to hear about it, but this is a decision that we should probably spend a little more time on before we start really soliciting proposals from a specific company, as opposed to deciding if we want to go in this direction, find out what else is out there for other companies to do this.
And we're not a company. We're a 501c3 charitable nonprofit organization that's looking to fund. So the funding would go into North Andover School District.
Right.
So it's not, we have no products, nothing to sell. We just would funnel resources and capital into creating curriculum here with the teachers to, and then provide the ability to do support with metrics and data.
No, I didn't mean to suggest to besmirch your intentions, but I did notice that you just incorporated 6 weeks ago. And there may be other organizations out there that have more experience, and we should see what else is out there as far as if this is the road we're going to go down. That's all I'm saying. I think it's an important issue. I know you mentioned, I think you meant Treasurer Goldberg, but Treasurer Grossman, who was also from Newton, made this one of his points of his time in office. So I do believe in financial literacy. I think it's an important aspect we should bring to our schools. Just finding the right fit, whether it's fit money or not. That's my suggestion.
Good. Thank you.
So just relatively quickly, thank you again for coming. We really appreciate this. I mean, I think it's really interesting. We were just having this conversation, not really planning on this with my own kids and a little bit of money that they had. And I was trying to figure out the best way to have the conversation about kind of, making sure we put it in the bank as opposed to, go buying the toy that was out there. And I think it would be interesting to see what you would do for teachers and parents in terms of some of that conversation that's out there, and just the meaningful input and what's relevant at appropriate ages to kind of, they don't really get that compounding piece and what that $4,200 is in 12 years. But it was very interesting, and so I'm really entertained by the prospect of this. Thank you.
Yeah. And for me, Ms. Fisher and Mr. Williams, thank you again for seeking us out. This is very humbling to be recognized and to be viewed as a community of luminary thinkers. I appreciate the comments. I think we have to do a decision on curriculum, but I fully respect the value in having somebody say, here's some money to build your curriculum, as opposed to coming to the capital operations budget to say, we got to buy a curriculum. So to that point, I think we need to discuss this further. I would wonder, what is the outcome of the work product? Would we have the ability to continue to use that, or do you have a funding model for the work product that would be developed here within the foundation?
So as I understand your question, what is the value of the work product? You would continue with the product. This would be for the benefit of North Andover school system, and the benefit to the organization would be the gathering of the metrics and a model that could potentially be rolled out to other school districts, charter schools, and with its success, then we would really look for a nationwide rollout.
Right, so the model for you, from what I understand, is that this would be made available to others without a license fee or without any substantial cost. Is that your intention?
That was the intention.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll turn it over to the Board of Selectmen. Any comment or questions?
No, a very admirable cause, I think, and a very good experience for kids to learn how to save money early in their lives. It's something, it's a trait that or something that I think we all need. So, very good. Okay.
My field, I deal with a lot of families as they're buying their first home, so you kind of get a sense of people's understanding of money, and I think it's a really necessary program. And I think of the age where our young adults, they buy things like by going like this, without any idea where that money came from and where it's going, till all of a sudden. I think the nation does need a good financial program for everybody, and it needs to probably start in the schools. So whatever the board's decision is, of course, that's I respect their decision, but good for you for thinking of it and presenting it to us. Thank you very much.
The point you're raising is very important, because we're moving away from a cash economy and using cash. So in a sense, we're not pulling out that 20 or 30, so we're really not seeing at the end of the month we see a bill, and many people aren't able to manage that bill. And then, of course, the credit card companies love it because they charge 24% annualized, and the fees if you're 2 days late is egregious. So, our hopes are to, give the warning signs and teach them early, so maybe credit card companies go out of business.
And credit scores. People have no idea how something that they think is such a, I'll just go pay off my credit card, and they don't realize their credit score just went down. There's a lot that people need to learn, and it really does impact their life if they don't have a good, good finances. Buying a house, buying a car, going to college. So I think it's great. Thank you. Good luck with it.
Sure, we still really get to weigh in on curriculum, and I feel really, I think it's neat as a selectman to sit here and listen to this presentation and get to weigh in. I can remember being at North Andover High School and learning how to balance my checkbook in Diane Lightburn's class, and David, you mentioned Steve Grossman and Treasurer Goldberg both making this such an emphasis, and I think it's exciting to see that you've thought of North Andover as the place where you'd like to invest resources. Hopefully upon further review we find out that this really is as neat of an opportunity as you're describing, and we get to move forward. So thank you for coming and presenting to all of us tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Stewart?
I motion the school committee to adjourn.
The next school committee meeting in its entirety will be March 24th, not the 10th.
Correct.
And at this point, I'd like to take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, we'll take like 5 minutes left. Hopefully they get some good numbers. Okay, we're going to start up again, so...
Get that gavel going.
Kind of always wanted to be a fountain.
I'm going to gavel Stan.
Yeah. Like the kids at Kittredge.
Mr. Mealy, you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like.
We'll do it like the kids at Kittredge, you know, the principal. Then everyone.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the Board of Selectmen back to order. I'm going to go back a couple of items, one item actually, for the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting. We've not had a chance to do that. So if anyone has a chance or had a chance to review the minutes and would like to make a motion.
Mr. Chair, motion to accept the minutes from the February 22nd meeting of the Board of Selectmen.
I have a motion and a second from Mr. Stewart. Any discussion on that? Everybody was good with those? Okay, minutes were good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Approval of the minutes. Communications announcements, we've gone to the McKelly Center. Job posting and vacancy log, Mr. Manager.
Yeah, let's take any questions. You'll notice there hasn't been dramatic change. We're still going on building inspector and health inspector. Obviously, you're aware. Tomorrow night, for folks who are following us along, tomorrow night, the meeting will be televised beginning at 6 o'clock. Will be the beginning of the process for interviews with police chief candidates. So that's tomorrow night for the public, 6 o'clock in this location. The rest of the information is posted. We should be moving forward. The selection of fire chief was made at your last meeting. Everything is moving forward so that new Chief McCarthy will be sworn in at that meeting, the 21st meeting. Everything is moving forward in that case, so I don't expect any bumps in the road to get to the 21st and have that happen.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions or comments on the job vacancy log? Okay, none, we'll move forward. Any other communications or announcements from anybody? Boy, quite a lot tonight.
Stan has left the building. Sports
Okay, so let me just go back. Mr. Collier does have an announcement.
So March 13th, I think I'm channeling our Madam Chair who's absent, but she's throwing a fundraiser through the North Andover Merchants Association. So the 13th is I think next
Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday evening, right, at Jamie's.
Yeah,
So
it's closing the restaurant.
check out www.northandovermerchants.org to find out more about how you can fund the NAMA scholarship this year.
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of things going on this week. I believe the firefighters have their annual Irish night over at the Relief Inn. The youth center has their event coming up very soon. So, I don't have the date right off the top of my head, Rick, but
It's in April, though, isn't it? It's April, yeah.
so it's a busy time. So if you want to get out there, there's plenty of things to do to get out there and do. Any other communications or announcements? Okay, let's move to consent items. First on the agenda are donations. We have 2 donations, one from David Bevan and Carolyn Kinsey in the amount of $25 to the fire department.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Thank you to Mr. Bevan and Ms. Kinsey for that donation to the fire department. All those in favor?
Aye.
But I'd like to mention that it's in memory of firefighter Ray McLean.
Oh, thank you. Yes, yes, that's.
Gosh, he was with the fire department a long time, and he was also the gentleman that did the signs for addresses. You know, what he would paint.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay, well, thank you for that. And I believe that was a unanimous vote to accept that. Next is another donation, and this one is in the amount of $300 that is being made to the Veterans Services. And this donation is from, sorry, I'm trying to start with thing, Herbert Kuna for $300, and it's to fund a wheelchair ramp. And so I'll hear a motion.
Move approval?
Okay, and again, thank you very much. This is a very generous donation to a very good cause, so thank you, Mr. Kuna, and I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, if I could briefly comment on this, you may notice it's for a wheelchair ramp fund. Veteran Services Agent Jerry McGuire provided us with this check from Mr. Cooner. It's going to go, and it's the first of its kind in terms of investment, in terms of a donation to a wheelchair ramp fund. His hope is to focus on that and obtain more donations for a wheelchair ramp fund. So as veterans need wheelchair ramps at their homes to access their homes, he'd have a ready amount of money to be able to engage with local contractors, hopefully get some volunteer services as well, so that when veterans are either returning from the hospital or returning from service, they'd have an opportunity to access their home with a wheelchair ramp.
Great fun, great cause. Okay, so we'll move next to appointments. We have 2 appointments. Would one of the appointment committee like to discuss one? We'll make a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Jerry Wilson to the Neighborhood Conservation District Committee. Comes with a terrific background, suited really nicely to this commission. So, again, I'll make a motion. Yeah.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Accept that head scratch as a yes.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion for an appointment for Robert T. Leonard to the Festival Committee. Again, gentleman that we interviewed, very enthusiastic, and just looking to give back to his community.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I will take the chair's prerogative to again thank both of these people for stepping forward and volunteering to make your community better. As the chair would say, our community runs as smoothly and as well as it does because we have so many people who are willing to get involved and take on these roles. So thank you to both of these people and all of our committee people that get involved and help out the community. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So, okay, moving along. We have a request from Green Strides to use the streets of North Andover for their annual Rock Run Half Marathon on Sunday, May 1st, 2016, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Anybody here? Oh, great.
Aye.
I would need longer than that. I'd have to go longer than 1 p.m., but that's okay. I won't be running it.
So I'm just here to answer any questions. I'm here for Eli. I work closely with Green Stride. The location's moving this year. It used to be along 125 at Jimmy's Pizza was a start-finish area. This year, we're moving it to Smolak Farms. Excuse me. So the roads we're using are much, it used to be all within North Andover. Now it's also in Boxford. And so there's only about just a few miles of it actually are in North Andover. More of the course is in Boxford now, but it starts and finishes at Smolak Farms. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
How many years is this now that this has been going on?
This will be the third year.
Third annual, yeah, okay. Makes sense. I should have read that more carefully. Okay. Motion?
Second.
Any comments, questions, other than that stupid one? All those in favor? All right. We're all set. Thank you for coming in. You know, you cast this little chair on me the last one. I didn't get a chance to read all my comments tonight. Okay, so we have a request from the Youth and Recreation Services to waive permit fees for the annual Spring Carnival on April 20 to 24, 2016.
Mr. Chair, so moved.
I don't know if you, hi everyone, I'm Tom Szysowski, the chairman of the North Andover Youth Recreation Council. So in conjunction with our sister board, the Joseph N. Herman, we're sponsoring the carnival once again, so we're really happy about doing that. Same location, 1600 Osgood Street, April 20th through the 24th. Just to make sure everybody realizes this is a significant funding source for the summer programs and staff that Rick runs each year. So it is, it literally it goes to, you know, make sure we keep our teenagers and so forth employed, and we're happy to be able to do it again. So we just want to request that the fees be waived for the permits would be one, and then the other request is for us to put lawn signs and hang a banner or two around town to advertise.
When you say around town, do you mean on town property?
On town property, excuse me, yeah. And typically we usually put it, I forget where is it, on the...
Normally usually at the downtown fire station.
Right, so we're going to probably have to look to go someplace else.
By the youth center.
Right.
Right. We just exclude the common area and the rotary around the comfort.
Right.
That's all I ask.
Okay.
Again, I'll move approval again.
A motion and a second. And I'll ask you the same question. How many annual is this now? It's not written here.
It's a long one.
It's a valid
26,
question.
yeah. Yeah, 26.
26.
Yeah, we had a year off, so it's pretty, I mean, it's been pretty steady for the last...
first year without carry cross, actually.
Right.
I was thinking of that.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot. I should have mentioned. We're going to get something for Carrie and recognizing all the years
tremendous
that
volunteer for this community.
Yeah. And she'll still be working a ticket booth, so she'll still be there.
Of course, she'll be there. Yeah.
And also, it's a thank you to Aussie Properties.
Yes.
It's a great location.
Yeah,
I think
it's
we
great.
found that actually you've done better there than we have in other locations. So.
Right. So as long as we get decent weather, we should...
Yeah, no rain.
I know.
Again.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, you're all set.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for all you do. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a request from Columbia Gas of Massachusetts to excavate on East Water Street from Clarendon Street to Fountain Drive for the purpose of replacing its gas mains.
So moved.
The gentleman has sat here all night long, and I think he can introduce himself and present.
Good evening, Selectmen. My name is Vinny Luciano. I'm a construction specialist with Columbia Gas. Here to answer any questions.
Second.
Do we have a motion?
Yeah, he did.
Okay, we need to make sure that the motion does not allow for excavation before April 1st. So can you include that in your motion, please?
Yeah. Yes, you did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do I have a second?
Bill did.
Oh, where was I? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Okay. Next, we have a request from Bradstreet Partners LLC to modify the development plan on at Bradstreet on Main project. Gentlemen, welcome. Come in.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Town Manager. My name is Bob Lavoie. I'm an attorney over in Andover. And with me tonight is Mr. Perkins. Bill Perkins is the manager of the LLC that owns the former Bradstreet School site that acquired from the town. And we thought we'd come tonight for a couple of reasons. One is to check in with the board and for us to give you a quick status report. We've done that in writing, but we're happy to, do that as well. The prime purpose that we submitted correspondence through the town manager back in early January was to make the board aware and support it with a fairly detailed report, which I hope you've had the opportunity to look at. That, as you all know, the construction is underway. The building in the back on Saunders Street is under construction. That's the residential building. The mixed-use building up front, originally programmed to be retail on the bottom floor, office space above. That building is challenged in the sense that, well, you may be, those that are in the real estate industry are probably more conversant with it, but office space, there's lots of office space in North Andover and its surrounding environments. In fact, Mr. Perkins is giving you a statistic in his letter and his report. There's, over the last 2 years, there's been an accumulation of approximately 400,000 square feet of office space that some of it may recently have gone under agreement, but most of it's been sitting around for a long time. I think I've heard that the board's probably more recently familiar with the East and West Mills converting some of their space to apartment use. So, to cut to the chase, the proposal that Mr. Perkins and his group have asked the selectmen to consider boils down to, on the front building on Main Street, still, same footprint, same first floor, 9,000 square feet of retail space for which there is a vibrant market, that instead of devoting the upstairs portions to office space, that we'd ask the board to consider our proposal that it be allowed to be townhouse condominium use for residential purposes. And, from a market perspective, there's backup in our materials, but, clearly the hotter market, if you will, is in residential. And every community is trying to get the right balance of housing stock. In the downtown area, there is a fair amount of office space already, a fair amount of office space vacancy. So the project with respect to that building is sort of at a crossroads. The foundation's been put in. The foundation, can be purposed either for either of these proposals, the original proposal or, this modified proposal that we'd like you to consider. And the thing that, I like to think, and I think most people, including the board members, like to think in terms of goals. So if the goal is to get that space built and occupied, still have the full 9,000 square feet of retail on the first floor. In terms of what banks traditionally, and especially after the crash, are willing to finance, is no one is financing anything like a Field of Dreams, that if you build it, they will come, especially in the face of the office space vacancy rate that exists. So that's why Mrs. Perkins is very careful about accumulating quite a bit of data for your consideration, and providing a visual of what, regardless of what the use was, what this building would look like. And that's why we come before you. The residential building in the back, as people have seen, has been in the process of being framed. The site work is it is certainly not completely done, because the building won't be done for a while. But I think the appearance is the shows that, a lot of time and effort has gone into this, and, clearly the board spent a lot of time with this whole proposal, and we very much appreciate what the board's done to date. And with that, we'd certainly be happy to answer any questions.
How many apartments are we talking?
Thanks, Don. What we said in our proposal was anywhere between 7 and 14, and that was really based on what we thought what the site could handle. It depends whether it's 1.5 stories or 2 stories above there. If you compare it, if the limiting factor is parking, then there's more parking in almost any use under office. So even if we did 14 units, because if you take 3 per 1,000 is what the office number usually is. So it'd be like 27 spaces, and they typically would be around the same time as the retail uses. If you had residences, they usually complementary use, and there would be certainly 1.5 to 2 would be the most. So even if you had 14 units, it would be about the same parking. So I don't know if that answers your question. I put it in as a range because we wanted to come in with some renderings.
How's it breaking down to bedrooms?
We haven't got to that point yet. It was really a discussion with Mr. Mailer about the change of use and what the process was for approval, because we think we've fully bought into helping revitalize the downtown, as of a lot of others, and we want what's best for it. And we just don't think the time frame, it's startling how hard it is to rent office these days. There's just so much space, and the whole healthcare changes have really discouraged small medical offices, so that a lot of the medical offices are being bought up by bigger companies because of cost savings. So to get the smaller tenants that you would typically be in these buildings, about the only thing I would give you is that a lot of the office space isn't the best. So some of it's either an industrial use or it's they're pretty tired. So but at the very least, very best, we would be cannibalizing some other space, and it would be very hard for the cost to be able to build it. And I think what Mr. Voy was mentioning is that the way banks are really tight these days, so we'd have to have at least.
Not me.
Write this down, Bob.
She's driving down there.
Yeah.
Well, my biggest concern is if there's going to be a lot of 2-bedroom apartments, and that's one thing we don't need in town is a whole bunch more kids that cost us money.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a kid. That was one thing about the fact there'd be condominiums, which I think some of them would be rented if they didn't sell right away. But the experience down there is there's been a demand for condominiums. So I don't think it's a kid-friendly environment. The size of the units could, 1 bedroom, usually it would have to be at least have an extra room for an office or something like that. I don't think it's a kid-friendly environment. It's not really. There'd be storage rooms on the first floor, and I think they'd be very desirable because there would be part of the, you want more affluent people downtown to be able to have businesses down there, use the restaurants, that sort of thing. So I think from that standpoint, it helps the downtown.
Mr. Perkins, you mentioned how difficult it was to get financing for these for this project, and you referenced the
No,
crash.
I didn't mean to say that. No, I said that it's difficult. The banks hold it very tight to standards that the federal government requires them to do. So any type of development like this, no matter who does it, you have to have pretty much 50% pre-leased by credit tenants. So that's really what I meant to say. It wasn't difficult to get financing. That was for the intended use of the development, but that's assuming you can get the type of tenants that the bank wants.
So for me, I wasn't involved in the original decision to put your property there, and I don't necessarily have a feeling one way or the other about you initially being there. What's disappointing to me is that I'm looking at what you provided as far as office space on Main Street that's been vacant over 3 years, over 3 years, over 3 years. That means this was the case before you ever entered into this project, that these spaces were open. And so why, it's just hard for me to look at this project and look at this request for a change, if I'm understanding this correctly, and not feel a little bit disappointed, because in the case of those buildings, those Main Street office space buildings that are vacant, that was the case when you entered into this project. And even though right now, and we had this discussion a few weeks ago about condominiums and the market, the way the market has responded to condominiums with their value going up, I'd hate for us to be responding to the current market trends and making such a long-term, making a decision that will have a long-term impact with the direction of our Main Street. Because for me, my personal vision for Main Street is I'd like to see more commercial down there. And I know it's not always as simple as if you build it, they will come. But for me personally, I have to say, and I'm just being blunt with you, that I was really disappointed to see that this is a direction that we're talking about going and where we're going to potentially be adding more residential to a corridor in our community, where when I speak to people, they're not yearning for more residential properties downtown. They're yearning for more business opportunities downtown.
Just a couple comments that some of the properties, as I mentioned, that you're referring to have been vacant for a long time are in poor condition. So that is a big factor. But as far as disappointed, I think we've been straight from the beginning. We spent a lot of time giving 4 different proposals, and we were willing to do all of them, including one was saving the building. This is the one that the board picked, and we made every effort to make it work. What I'm saying is it's almost, it would be, I don't want to say it's financial suicide, but it certainly would not be in the best interest, in my mind, in us or in the development to go and to put office space in an area which is loaded with it. You've got a Riverwalk right around the corner. You've got the Mills, which is already closing up some of their office space. You've got First and Main, that's got a lot of empty space, and the other ones you've had on Main Street. So if you look at any of the more mature communities, downtowns like Amesbury, where Bob's from, or Newburyport, or Portsmouth, they're all converting to residences. So it's not, it's not. I think that is the long-term trend. It's going back towards that. It's not to have several levels of office space. That's just not the way our sharing economy is working these days.
So you understand, I just want to close the loop, but you understand, though, the disappointment that can come where, the economy didn't just change yesterday.
I understand, but we was like 2 or 3 years ago, for instance, this RFP was out, but a lot of things have changed. I have a building in Andover. I haven't had vacancies more than one for a couple months in 15 years. And, I've had 3 vacancies now for several months. So there are a lot of things going on in the economy. But I think it's clear the generation is to have less office space. Unless you absolutely have to have space. There's more work at home. People are tired of commuting. And I think the best thing you can do for the downtown is have more people that live there, and not people that just necessarily just rent. But there's just not a need for offices anymore. It just, if you're in a big company in Cambridge or an office park, there's some differences. But as far as the small, unless you need walk-in customers, there just hasn't been as much demand. So, and I think that's been led a lot by some of the changes in the medical environment that I mentioned. I'm sorry if you're disappointed, but I think we've done everything we said we would do. And I think this is a realistic way to get the project moving and get it completed. And I think it'll be a great addition to the downtown. Excuse me, I have a cold. There's also, I want to say too, I'm excited that Andover Credit Union is going in across the street. And I know Chris Komboris bought a building across the street, and the quicker we get it done, it's going to help everybody down there.
I appreciate your honesty about the other rentals, because you're right. They're tired, and many of them are quite a distance away from Main Street that you have in your examples. Many do not have elevators, which is a problem for office space. I have to say that I have been approached by people who are really disappointed. They felt as though this was supposed to be, a good commercial project for the downtown. Did you ever think of, instead of doing residents, how about more commercial space? In downtown Andover, they have restaurants on the second floor.
Well, there's one that I know of, yeah.
Why did it go directly to residential? Perhaps, again...
I mean, I guess we were under a tight time schedule to get this project going. You know, we have an agreement with the town to keep the project moving. We haven't had any interest in offices.
Have you advertised, though? I mean, I see you have a sign in the front, but did you put a big sign saying, you know, commercial office space available, call this number? Has it been advertised? I didn't look in the commercial area, but I don't believe you have it listed in multiple
well, we have talked to a lot of
listing.
people. We're waiting to see how this goes before we start a big push on it. You know, we started this effort really in October, and then we made a presentation. You know, we submitted this package in January, so we're really waiting till that. We haven't done some advertising, but it'll be on LoopNet and all the others.
Which is the commercial, but I think not your average citizen isn't necessarily looking at LoopNet.
Well, it'll be on all of them. That's the one typically used for commercial.
Commercial, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's sort of an exclusive type site. But again, I would, just for example, and it's probably not a great example, but I think it will show how quickly, right next to Boston Chicken, they put a big sign up, and the vitamin shop is in there in no time at all. They had a big sign, coming soon, space, so forth.
That's retail. I mean, that.
Well, that's the thing. Maybe you should consider more retail instead of office, instead of residential.
Oh, you mean retail on the second floor?
Yeah.
I mean, we just don't feel there's a market for it, but you know, I mean, it's hard enough to get retail on the first floor these days. I mean, it's expensive to build buildings and to get somebody in them, but we feel we can do that. As far as residences, we think it's a better fit for you know, for that building in the location. And we think it's going to be a long road to get enough offices to be able to build the building.
But again, if you put even a sign up that, again, that you have retail on the first floor and offices, I mean, it just seems like you haven't really reached out to the public. We certainly want you to succeed. There's no question about it. Nobody wants a vacant building. And actually, downtown North Andover right now, there are first floor, street level. There's really no vacancy other than the Converse store that is next to CVS. It's full. Mm-hmm. So obviously there is a market and an interest in downtown. You know, again, we do want you to succeed, but it seems it's awfully quick that you've given up on this without. What I would suggest is you need to get the message out that it's coming, and we have the space available, whether you have small offices or bigger offices or second floor retail, before we go right into residential. What I'm hearing...
There's just very little demand. Again, we've been marketing other office properties in very parallel markets like in Andover.
But again, you didn't do this site.
I understand. I'm just saying that I did a lot of research on the entire area, and this just covers North Andover.
Can I follow up on one of your questions, Mr. Perkins? You said that you did a lot of research, but this is my own not knowing. Did you have tenants lined up for the office space that have since backed out? So there was never anybody potentially...
2 or 3 years ago. I mean,
so there was never...
they were like 1,000 square foot tenants. I mean, No, I mean, we had some retail tenants that were very interested, but the longer this goes on, I mean, they have a lot of answers. They're going to set up a business and livelihood. They want to know, you know, when it's going to be built and who's going to be upstairs and what the parking situation is going to be like. So it's kind of like once I decide what to do, I have to run with it. And I'm just saying that this is not a good idea to put offices upstairs. And we think it's going to be a longer road to hoe. And I think that's evidenced by the vacancies in the market and recent experiences of other places like the mills around the corner.
So, Mr. Perkins, I was part of the group when we originally got the first proposal for this, which did not come from your group. It came from another group that was mostly residential at that time, and we rejected that because we were really looking for a mix of business and residential that was a different mix than what that was. And you know, we had, I forget what it was, 4 or 5 different submissions that we had, and yours was specifically chosen because of the mix of business and residential, which we liked, and especially on Main Street. And having spent most of my life down there in that building that'll soon be a credit union, you know, I can recall the amount of residential that we had down there, and just the lack of people coming down there to do business, because it was just all residential, and it was taken up by residential parking. So my goal was always to see more commercial go down there. So I won't quite use the word disappointed, but I certainly feel like we made a commitment and we rejected other proposals that had a different mix, more residential mix, because we were specifically looking for that commercial base. So I feel like if we were to turn around on that, we've really done a disservice to those other folks that had put in those submissions, because they had, basically were looking for that more residential. So that's my comment.
Can I just respond to that? I think that first proposal was very low-income housing, if I remember correctly. The first one, the first one that you approved, and then, right, for the first RFP, is that the one you're referring to?
There was 2 different RFPs. The initial was for affordable housing. The second set of proposals, there were 4 proposals. One was for a retail. You submitted one proposal which contained 4 options. There was another proposal which was preservation of the Brad Street building and a conversion to market rate housing. And there was another housing proposal. Yours was specifically accepted because, or selected for, really 2 reasons. One, it provided a mix of both commercial and retail, or retail, commercial, and residential. And 2, because that front building, the Main Street building, was a commercial-only building, because there was another option within your 4 which provided a residential on the second floor, pretty much what you're proposing today. So what the selectmen chose was the proposal that we'll move forward with. Not commenting on the
I
change.
don't disagree with you. I don't remember it saying anywhere in a meeting or that it was commercial, just commercial in that front building.
It was contained within your RFP. You presented options. I don't know if they were 1, 2, 3, or 4, A, B, C, or D, and the selectmen accepted very expressly through their own vote. It's the reason why we're here, quite frankly, because the recitals within the land development agreement and the provisions within the land development agreement require that if you're going to change the proposal, you need Board of Selectmen approval before you move on to the land use boards. It's why we're here having the conversation. It's not just a communication tool. Quite frankly, you need an affirmative vote of the Board of Selectmen to make modifications to the proposal. So I need some direction from the board if they want to further that conversation, because there are very specific questions about density, the proposal size, the pro forma. Has the pro forma changed from a commercial to a 14-unit residential? Are they condominiums? Are they rentals? There's a lot of technical questions we can get into, but it doesn't seem for me to make sense to spend a lot of time in that sort of technical arena if the board isn't supportive of making the change.
I understand. For the same reason I couldn't answer Dawn's exactly what the units would look like until, we were on the same page. But I will say the footprint is exactly the same. The only other...
What about the building height? Because you said...
Well, that's subject to what I thought the process was, is, going to the planning board and having them decide whether it was a modification or not. I mean, we could do within the downtown district. We'll certainly abide by what the laws are there.
Could you tell me what number you're talking? Are you talking like 35 feet?
I think that's the limit in the downtown.
I believe it is. So you were asking for...
We're not asking to go beyond that. What I'm saying is that if we're on the same page as far as the use and the down there, then we would come up with a proposal. And again, the way I understood it, maybe Bob could comment, was the process.
What were you thinking of asking per square foot for the office space?
I think it depends on whether it's a vanilla box, whether it is, it's a dental office. I mean, there's a range of prices. As far as a rental or these, when we did the Great Pond Crossing project, one of the reasons that was successful is because I brought in, I sold some units versus just rent them. Then it would be the same thing here. And it's a good way to get established businesses. Like we got Bella Vita Spa to come over because they could own for the first time. And it's a way to get established. Most developers aren't willing to sell. And so we've already had contacted by some other established businesses in the area. But all retail, no, excuse me, no office.
What is your occupancy at Great Pond Crossing?
I sold it, but I filled it up, and that was full. I mean, it was all sold.
But then again, so why wouldn't you consider retail on the second floor? Because I believe your building there, they did have what was it, office space on the second floor? Was yours the one with the barn that, no, that's your.
No, well, that's the second phase. I sold it, but the first phase, you know, the Bella Vita Spa and Mad Maggie's. You'd think I would remember all of them, but it was a great
Well, that's
project.
a good thing. You've been busy. But again, it just seems like,
There's it's hard enough to get people to do retail on the first floor, I mean, for what it costs. I mean, on the second floor,
but you just said that you're all filled up there. Downtown Main Street is all filled up for retail on the first floor.
well,
And in downtown Andover, there's retail and there's office space on the second floor in some of
it's
those
very
buildings.
uncommon to have
It is uncommon, but they do have it.
office on the second floor anymore.
You know, again, we don't want to see you fail. We definitely don't want to see you fail, but again, I feel as though there should be more of a marketing effort for either retail or office space on the second floor if you think you're struggling with that.
I've talked, as I mentioned in the report, I talked to pretty much all of the commercial brokers in the area, and many of them said it's been 3 years since they've had a showing on some of their spaces.
But
So
respectfully, you were here 2 years ago, right? Am I not mistaken?
Something like
January
that.
2014 that you were before the board, and you're referencing something that happened 3 years ago.
I'm using an example of some brokers I've spoken to, but I'm saying that the market at that time for office wasn't as bad as it is now. And I think that's you know, there's nothing I can do about that. You know, it's just not a good idea to add more office space to an already saturated market.
So I'll say why I was, again, not a member of that board, but I can specifically remember, and it's unfortunate that our chairwoman isn't here this evening, because I can remember her passionately defending a proposal. It was not your proposal, but one that would have added more affordable housing downtown, and that was rejected by the board because of a desire to see more commercial properties. And I feel like we don't have the option to go back to square one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will just be blunt, I feel like I look at this request, and it feels to me that you've got the space, you've been able to come into the space, and now you're telling us, and you're referencing market data to support why, but you're telling us that you'd like to see the project change, the scope of the project change. And you're using data that preceded when you even put your proposal in. It's again, I mean, you've already invested money into the site, and so again, it goes back for me to the word disappointed, because I mean, we don't have the option of going back and saying, okay, I don't believe we do. Okay, let's go and look at, you know, what those proposals are again, and let's see who best fits our vision and who's willing to adjust and tailor it to what our vision as a board is. I mean, you've already presented a vision to us. You've come in, and now 2 years later, you're proposing a change that's really not at all within the vision of what that then board wanted. And I agree with, and I support that decision that board made.
May I interject here a little bit? The idea of building down there is to get businesses. You have the businesses on the first floor, okay? Is he having trouble renting the lease space upstairs? Yes, and without the apartments, I could see this downstairs not being built. If the economy doesn't go for it, it's gonna go south, guys. Better take half a loaf than a full loaf.
Again, though, I know you disagree, but I don't see an aggressive marketing program for office space or second floor retail. This
isn't the only property we're involved with. I mean, we're pretty. We've done a lot of.
But it's our property. It's the property that we did with you as a partnership. And again, I think I'd like to see something more aggressive in marketing that spot for what you said you were willing to present to us and to build for the community.
We always have projects being marketed of some very similar measure, and we always bring it to people's attention. And it isn't anything against the downtown. I think those who are involved with it thinks it's going to be a tremendous success. I've followed the transformation of Andover's downtown over many years, and it's now reaching critical mass. It's hitting, you know, they still have some problems, but it's a very similar path, and I think it's going to get there. And I think, as I mentioned, Andover Credit Union, a lot of those are coming because of this project, and I would hate to see the project get slowed down while I'm waiting for office tenants. You know, and I just don't think it's a good idea to add more office space. I'm very familiar with the market. I've talked to a lot of brokers. I did all this research, and I think it's hard to argue with. I mean, if there was a market for office, I certainly don't want to come back and ask for a change. I mean, I've done a lot of work in the Merrimack Valley for a lot of years. I value my reputation. I don't want to disappoint the board. But I also want it to be a successful project for everybody. And there just isn't much of a market for office right now.
Do we know what the occupancy at First and Main is? Is there a vacancy there? I think.
Well, the only vacancy, at least on the street level, is the Converse store.
Right.
But again, we haven't talked about price per square foot. We haven't.
I've met with Tina a couple of occasions. Tina Messina, she's been very helpful. I think that space is about 6,000 square feet. They do have a number of vacancies on the second floor for office for a long time, but they don't have an elevator.
They don't have an elevator.
Yeah.
And it's the same, the examples you gave us, some of them are definitely more industrial office space.
But you got to understand, like some of the businesses that we would be targeting, they don't care that, you know what I mean? They might.
No, I don't agree.
Well,
I think to have a downtown Main Street office versus industrial commercial space way out on 114.
Well, there's no question.
That it's not the same image for somebody who is going to put in a small law office or a CPA or a small insurance office. It's just not the same. They're not going to be want to be down in those, in so many that you listed. They're not going to want to be there.
I didn't sort through them, the listings, but again, there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of square feet.
You didn't look at the ones you gave us?
Well, I'm not going to subjectively take out the exact formula, but these are office-led industrial spaces that we're technically competing with, and some of them are very marketed very far below what it even costs us to build them.
But that's why I was asking what you wanted per square foot. But I understand if you're not prepared to give that answer, and it can vary depending on build-out. I understand that.
I mean, I have to think once the town offices are rebuilt and we've got all those town employees back down on Main Street, that it's going to be a vital area. It's going to be a very vibrant area once it's all built out. And I respect your opinion, because obviously you're much more involved in the market than I am. And I'm more sitting on the space where we had this agreement, and this was the project that was chosen because of the mix of residential and commercial, and we rejected other offers because of their mix, and this was what we chose. And I just can't see going back on that and not respecting that original proposal. But I do respect your opinions.
There is provisions for changes and modifications in the agreement, and I think it states that it understands that conditions change, and that's why there is a process for that. So, I mean, conditions certainly have changed. And I think, as Mr. Stewart says, is that the market, at least the retail market, is stable, and the residential market is solid, very solid. And I think this is the time we want to get it done. We really don't want to be waiting for months or longer for office space, for office uses.
Are we, any other questions or any other comments?
Well, this is supposed to go before the planning board as well.
I don't think it goes before the planning board unless the board agrees it goes before the planning board. I mean, this is a fundamental change, whether it's the...
Can we reach a halfway meeting here and allow housing on the second floor, not the third?
Well,
would be the opposite, I would think.
Yeah, I would think that would make it more difficult if you had business on the third floor and skipping a floor.
No third floor.
No, what he's saying is don't do three floors, just do the two.
Now, the impact of the housing won't be as bad as, my fear is that if you're advertising for space, if I was running a business, I wouldn't move until I knew that space was full. Which could mean if it doesn't get full, then the bottom part doesn't get built. So it's just going to drag. I just got my crystal ball going.
I think the struggle, Don, is that gauging the market based upon the inventory that exists versus gauging the market by putting a sign in a window of property that exists may be different things. And right now, I'm sure, and you know your business heck of a lot better than I, since the building doesn't exist and the space doesn't exist, there's a speculation that there won't be occupancy when there is no sign in the window, proverbial or even literal sign in the window, because the property doesn't exist to market. And that, therein lies a little bit of the challenge with this.
Do you have people lined up for the retail on the first floor yet?
We have a couple of people really close, but we lost a couple because of the time. To your point, if the building was all built, it would be a lot easier, but it's not going to get there until we have it. What this will mean if we don't do residents upstairs, let me just explain. So banks consider residential units as being 100% occupied, because if a building like an apartment building, you don't need any pre-leasing because it's assumed that they're all 100% demand. Whereas if you're commercial, you have to have at least 50% pre-lease. So if we stay the way it is, we have to have the building 50% leased before we can frame it. If we went to residences upstairs, then we could start immediately, because we would all of a sudden we would have 50% of the building pre-leased. So that was the other reason we wanted to be able to keep it going. I mean, we don't want to delay this project, and we want to get it completed. So,
in combining the two concepts, that's why I mentioned in my initial remarks, we're sort of at a fork in the road, that if one of the key goals is to finish sooner, then this current proposal we're bringing forward would, I mean, I hate to use the word guarantee, but it would be more likely to succeed quicker, because the bank would not be holding out for 50% pre-leased. And pre-leased, when Bill was talking about residential, it's deemed by the lending community, it's deemed to be pre-leased, because they have no doubt that at some price point residential units will be filled, whether they're condos or apartment. And again, just to be clear, the design concept for the residential in the front building would be condominium, and ideally townhouse, because that's what's hot right now. And but getting back to what I'm trying to use as a metaphor, a fork in the road, is if the vision is to have second floor office space downtown, then to get there we need to have 50% of the front building pre-leased, which has been difficult to date, and wishing it were otherwise, is not going to make it any easier. Whereas, what was stated a few minutes ago is, I think intuitively everybody knows that if there is a building up there already and you tack signs on that saying, opening soon, hurry up and get your reservation in or you're going to lose out. We won't get to that status as quickly without the residential.
Is it not possible to build the exterior walls and build the structure before subdividing the second?
Only if the town wants to do the financing, because there's no commercial bank that will finance it.
What was your plan 2 years ago? Was it that you imagined being able to grab all of these potential commercial?
The office market was definitely stronger 2 years ago. I practiced in Andover for 30 years, but I've been in the North Andover market a lot as well. From my window, I can see two gorgeous buildings on Central Street that have never had for lease signs before. Both have for lease signs out, because what Bill's experiencing on 28 Andover Street, which has turned into a pretty little hot market in and of itself, is Bill uses the term business formation, and it's basically, I think all of us see it in the shrinking middle class, or what will you, is that a lot of people are working from home now. Bricks and mortar mean less and less to the growing commercial base, such as software and other companies. Banks, you can see the Capital One commercials about tearing down the buildings and having, not kiosks, but cafes, they're calling them. So, I mean, the whole office I mean, if you think back to where we were in 2008, 2009, there are so many office buildings in this corridor. I mean, there's never going to absorb all the office space in this corridor.
But you're asking us to go back to 2008,
No, I'm just using it. And no one can turn the clock back. And I am doing a little bit of pushback to say that, 2 years ago, the office market was much stronger than it is now. It's
Well, if for no other reason, just the whole healthcare community. Like I said, I always had a lot of small doctors' offices and medical communities, and a lot of them are getting bought up. Beth Israel and Leahy and Lawrence General, they were going around and buying doctors' offices because they can't have all the expenses that they need for this new coding. So a lot of them are just being acquired. And I know several in North Andover that Beth Israel's negotiating with now. It's an ongoing problem, and that's why you don't see anybody adding office market. It's very uncommon in the suburbs now, and certainly not on something on spec. If some company is stable and they want to have their own office building, that's a different story. But to do it on spec without any pre-leasing, I mean, no bank's going to allow that.
I want to say this is such a delicate project because what you do in this space, I mean, you used the term before, the metaphor that we're at a crossroads, and that's absolutely what this project represents for Main Street. And the decision we make tonight determines whether or not we're pushing Main Street in a direction where we focus more on commercial long-term, despite the current state of the market, or whether we push it more towards a mixed use that I won't speak for my colleagues, I don't see that as my desire for Main Street, unfortunately.
So I agree with that, and
okay.
I think the other aspect of it was, we had the Bradstreet School there, and there's a lot of sensitivity around that, and we've said, we deemed it as the best use for that property, and we thought, I still believe that it's commercial, and again, I am not in the real estate business, so I can't dispute, like Rosemary can, or discuss what the terms are, but what the current conditions are, but certainly from what I agreed to back in that time was for the commercial mix. I think we've talked about this a lot. I think we understand that the opinion is that the market is softer now than it was at the time. I think we've got our points and counterpoints. I'm going to give the board one more opportunity for questions, and I think we should move this along. Anybody have anything else they want to? And I'll give you obviously an opportunity to respond.
Can I ask my more informed colleagues, the town manager, is this really a this or that type option? I mean, is there no opportunity to negotiate and try and get something more favorable? I mean, it's only commercial or residential that we're talking about. Is there a way that we can revisit what the other proposals were and see what we liked about them, what traits we liked, and see if we can work with Mr. Perkins to apply some of the other things?
The only one that was in play was the one from the company that came out of Boston. It was to maintain the Bradstreet School, put commercial on the sides, and it would be like a little park setting in the middle. And that would have maintained the Bradstreet School. That there were more votes for this one.
Yeah, but if I understand the question, I think that certainly there can be conversations about this structure and what it gets used for. In other words, 2 stories versus 3 stories, but not modifying, not sort of systematically or categorically modifying the proposal in hand, because it was the result of an RFP and a vote by the Board of Selectmen that this option was the acceptable option. If you modified that due to market conditions, certainly the agreement affords you the ability to do that, but categorically sort of changing it.
The design you're talking about?
Yeah, in some other way to sort of, I'm not sure what you have in mind. I think that would be complicated. This certainly is an acceptable conversation on the idea of 2 stories versus 3 stories, currently assumed to be 2 stories between 16,000 and 19,500 square feet. So those kinds of conversations are fair. Do you require commercial on the second, but give the developer the opportunity for a 3rd floor, which could be residential, to sort of, if that's what you mean by a compromise, just throwing those kinds of things out. I think that is doable, but fundamentally changing the development from 2 buildings of approximately certain square feet, I think it runs the risk of saying that the RFP and the decision made by the board under that RFP may have been different.
Can I just ask one thing? I don't know why you think it's a bad option to have condominiums for purchase, market rate condominiums on the second floor. That's something that doesn't really exist down there. The ones that have gone in have sold very quickly at a very high price, and these are people that have invested their money, hundreds of thousands of dollars to live down there, and I think that's quite an asset to the downtown. Having some extra offices, which there aren't, at the best is going to cannibalize from some other location not too far away. I don't see why that's a better scenario. If there was active market demand, then I guess I could see that office might be a good choice for it. But we're trying to make it make what the market is calling for, and we think for ownership, both for the retail ownership, and which it doesn't exist. Nobody besides me that I know of is willing to sell brand new space. Again, similar to Grapevine Crossing, brand new space for established businesses for retail. And I don't know that anybody down there right now is selling condominiums for ownership, which I would like to do. There was some around the corner off of Sutton Street. Those sold very quickly, and there's a few ones on the other side of the downtown, but they all sold very quickly. And if your goal is to get this downtown being vibrant, I think that's the best path to go. I don't know why you think it's a bad thing not to have for ownership.
Because for me, I vividly remember sitting at home watching on public access as our now chairman defended at that point a position that only she held, which is that she wanted to see affordable housing down there, and I really thought that was an admirable and thoughtful way to use the property with a combination of affordable and commercial use. That's really what
that's affordable housing, right?
Yes, yeah. So affordable housing. I'm giving you my background. Sure. I really liked that idea. That was something that then board didn't agree with her on, and they opted for one that uses more commercial. And now you're coming before us asking to put more market rate housing in there. And that's great because it makes it more profitable for you, but I think so much more of our the agreement we have with you, I
can't do anything about market conditions. I don't know what else to say. I think that this fits the needs, and I think it's a good solution for the downtown. But if we certainly can wait if you want to consider for another couple of weeks, if you want to.
I mean, we've heard a lot of things from the board tonight that, some of which we anticipated, and some we didn't.
I have not had the opportunity to speak with Tracy at all today, and I feel like it's especially because she feels so passionately about this issue. I mean, I would motion at minimum that we table this issue until, if that's appropriate, I would motion we table it so that our colleague, our chairman, could participate in the discussion as well.
We'd be happy to come back in 2 weeks.
And I think it allows us to solicit more community feedback because, again, the people that have initiated discussion with me about this are very much opposed to the idea. And again, for us, yes, in 2016, right now, this is what the market condition is. 2018, 2020, that may not be the case because, as we've seen, 2 years apparently is a long time in real estate.
If you can survive.
Yeah, well, I mean, but again, we're talking about the long-term vision of our Main Street right now. I mean, we're talking right now about putting together a master plan this summer about what we want to see our town, our Main Street look like. And it's going to be built around, I imagine, very much what happens at this property. This is a very central property down there, and I personally would like the opportunity at least to solicit more feedback and allow us as a full board, especially with our chairman feeling very passionately about it. I would motion that we table this until a future meeting when all 5 of us could be present.
Okay, so we have a motion to table it. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
We have discussion, further discussion?
Can I add just a discussion point? One thing, regardless of, it's just, so what I said as part of the discussion is there would need to be some more details provided. It seems to me that maybe that's warranted here as well.
Mm-hmm.
What you have proposed is not very clear in candor.
No, it
It doesn't
isn't.
identify the amount of square footage, whether it'll sit within the original LDA or be beyond. It references condominiums, but you've mentioned condominiums, maybe if that's what's works. I think the real risk here is that if the board, for some reason, chooses to make a change, that you ask again, because I think at that point, it's going to be a really ugly conversation. This needs to be, it took us 12-plus months to negotiate the LDA. These are not simple things, right? They have a lot of nuance to them. They require a lot of sweat equity to get to that point to make sure that the agreement matches what the board's intention is. It's essential that you specifically ask for what you're seeking. How many square feet, how many floors, the makeup of the units, the number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms, every nuance to the discussion, because
This feedback is very important because, again, there's no crystal clear roadmap about, when you want to come talk to the selectmen, here's what we suggest you do.
Well, plus you remember the letter that I wrote asked a bunch of questions about the process for modification. So the reason we didn't come with specifics is because it was a
We
little
wanted to have this conversation.
Yeah, it's a little unclear in the documents exactly what the process is. It appeared to us it was more planning board input, but we, of course, wanted to start with the selectmen.
And as I
the
said
town
earlier, I'm
manager,
not
so.
criticizing the fact you didn't. I'm just making the point that if you're going to come back, now is the time. And let me be crystal clear about my interpretation. And I think I know this agreement. It sounds like a very I-centric comment, but being the person who spent a considerable amount of time with Bill and attorneys over more than a 12-month period, I think it is crystal clear. This board controls your next step. If there's going to be a substantial modification to the use or the size of this project, they must approve it first, period. Otherwise, your planning board approval, the first question of the planning board chairman, because I'm going to direct him to the agreement, his first question is does the board know you here, and have they approved what you're recommending? So
Well, that's why we're here.
Okay,
But I'm
so-
saying, the reason it wasn't meant to be incomplete documents,
Understood.
it's probably 30 pages.
Yep.
It was just because we wanted to understand the process.
And I'm not identifying it's incomplete, I'm simply saying now is the time, right?
Oh, the other things to consider too, and you might want to consider in your data, and it has to be some estimates, but parking is another consideration, and I know that's going to come up, because I think parking for residential, the numbers are different from than for commercial, and you've got more longer-term parking when you have residential, and whether or not that's right in front of the buildings or not, and taking up some of those commercial spots. Also, Dawn was alluding to the number of schools in the school system. I think you have certain formulas that you need to follow, whether on the number of bedrooms and the number of students in the school system. It's all things to consider as we think about it. And I know those are things that the planning board would obviously ask, but I think this board, it's information that this board should consider as well. So with that, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? This is the motion, and the second is to table this until our next meeting, which is the 22nd of March, I believe. 21st of March, 2 weeks from tonight, right? 2 weeks from tonight? Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll entertain a vote then. All those in favor of tabling until March 21st?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
All right.
We'll see.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, because we're getting close to the senior members' curfew. Okay, we have to close the 2006 annual town meeting for citizens petitions.
So, Mr. Chairman, there were 2 citizen petitions submitted by the deadline. You have one that was submitted several days ago and one you've just received today. So those 2 would be the sole citizen petitions for this annual town meeting coming up in May. So you would need a motion to accept those citizen petitions and include them in the warrant. I actually don't have a choice.
I was going to say, you can't.
But you would need to
They're
close
all
the
in
town
order.
meeting warrant as it relates to citizen
I have to wear my red jacket
petitions.
at town meeting now.
Yes.
I've wore that for 4 years. It's $500,000 they're trying to take away from us. Meals tax. $500,000.
Okay, so I'll hear a motion then?
To be clear, standard motion just to accept them into the town.
Well, what you need is the executive summary motion, which is to close the warrant for citizen petitions. Do you have a motion, Larry? Do you have
Top of page 4.
it? Do you want to just read it?
This is pretty standard. We've got 2. The deadline was today, so there's
That's it.
nothing else.
So the motion would be to move the Board of Selectmen close the 2016 annual town meeting warrant for citizen petitions. That's the motion.
So moved.
Second.
discussion for what was, I didn't get the face. What was wrong with that?
Because that's the town manager.
Made the motion.
Yeah.
I read the motion.
He read it.
I did not make the motion, I read the motion. It was moved.
It was yes, so. Second.
It was moved.
It's moved and seconded.
Yeah.
You were clarifying what had to be done. I would have done it, but I can't as chair, so.
That's right.
I have a point of information, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
This petition is to remove the sales tax we put on
Yes.
a couple years ago. The Board of Selectmen made this decision. Does this town meeting supersede our decision?
No, the decision was made at town meeting.
Made
from what I
was town
recall.
meeting.
Actually, 2 town meeting votes. The second one I attended, it was my first town meeting prior to my appointment. The first one had failed, the second one had passed, and the law requires that before it gets repealed, it has to be in existence for a period of time. That period of time has expired. So I think you're going to find, although we will submit it to council, I think you're going to find the citizen petition.
So am I right in surmising that this is $500,000 a year now?
Yes, you are correct in surmising that.
I will have a red jacket at town meeting.
Now, are we discussing the order? Will this appear last?
No,
That would be the chairman's prerogative.
Okay.
So what will normally happen at this point is the warrant will be numbered and ordered. Get together with the chairman, will number and order the standard methodology. We follow pretty standard methodology, typical citizen petitions.
Just
Some
before the
exception
school
last year,
committee
but
budget.
we'll see the standard order we've
They show
typically
that.
held. Financial articles are all together, zoning articles together, commonly citizen petitions near the beginning with general article changes,
Okay.
unless there's some reason for it to change. But
I changed that order last year.
yes, you did.
Specifically for a reason.
Yes.
So, okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of closing the 2016 annual town meeting warrant petition, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so we are closed on that. We also need to sign and approve the 2016 town election warrant. Do I have a motion?
Move that the Board of Selectmen approve and sign the March 29th, 2016 town election warrant.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Is it as we expected? I haven't seen it yet, but is it as,
Coming.
There it is, it's coming.
Can I just say how great of a job our town clerk did this
Very nice
past
job. So did
election on March 1st? I mean, when we have election as the topic, I think that entire team really does deserve
Let me say that.
a round of
Let me
applause.
say that.
50% turnout.
With school still in session, right? I mean, they were able to do that.
With a slight delay with the benefit of superintendent.
It wasn't smooth as can be.
They're going to close the next one.
Well, they always close for the presidential election, but I mean, a 50% turnout election is not something they're normally accustomed to with school still in session. So,
It's the same one's in the back.
They actually closed school there.
did they close that?
So we made a motion. Was it?
There was a motion and a second. I believe Mr. DeCalagero made the motion, Mr. Daly made the second.
Doesn't make a difference.
Doesn't make- All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we just need to sign these?
Yes.
See, great. Get Tracy, I'm on the bottom.
Makes it easier. It's that alphabetical
The young
order.
lady's been waiting to talk about licensing issues, so
Okay.
you can't take that away from her.
No, we're not adjourning yet.
It was a long meeting.
Okay, so can I have a motion to move into licensing?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're now in licensing. As chair of the licensing, I will also take this one.
It's a man of
My
many hats.
iPad has died, so I'll have to...
Oh, I got some paperwork to look at.
No, thanks, son. I don't use that anymore.
It never dies. No.
I didn't chat it up appropriately. Okay, let me move this forward. So first on the agenda is a request from Eli Balin of Green Strides for a one-day wine and malt license for a road race to be held at Smolak Farms on Sunday, May 1st, 2016. That same road race that we just approved earlier tonight. And I am looking at the... Okay, as the chair of the licensing, I'm just going to comment. I'm looking at the Division of Public Works. They have no conflicts. The police department has no conflicts, just looking to make sure that all the appropriate licenses are in place. And I kind of get to the fire department. What's that?
Didn't require it.
Didn't require anything from the fire department. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
How admirable that you're trying to keep them hydrated in as many ways as possible.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're all set. Thank you for sticking around. I hope it was worth your while.
No.
Okay. Next on the agenda, we have a motion, a request from Paul Gallant of Merrimack College, a one-day wine license for the on-stage performance reception at Rogers Center Performing Arts on Friday, March 11th, this coming Friday, 2016, from 8 to 11. All the paperwork is in place and in order. Do I have a motion? Thank you.
Move approval?
Second.
I have a motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And Merrimack College is all set. We have no old business. We have no new business.
We abstain.
Public comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Do I have a motion to move out of
Motion to move out of licensing?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're out of licensing. Back to our general meeting. No old business, still no old business, no new business. Public comment.
Wise man.
Okay. Town manager's report. Ask the manager.
Just a couple of items, just to follow up on the town meeting items. One, as you may recall, we established a special education reserve fund last year. What you'll find in the warrant you receive on the 21st will be a request for $150,000 from that special education reserve fund. Dr. Price and Mr. Maley have been keeping the assistant town manager and myself up to date on the spending from SPED since the beginning of the year. It'll be, I haven't looked at the specifics yet, but expect it'll fall in line with everything we expected the fund to do. You may recall, as a mechanism to make the dollars available within the fiscal year, we'll need what's called a special town meeting within a regular town meeting. I'll walk you through that process for those folks in the future, not at this meeting. For those folks who need that, it's simply that you adjourn a regular town meeting, you open it up, you open a special town meeting, you make that vote, you close the special, you turn to the regular. Really pretty simple stuff, but it makes the dollars readily available in the current fiscal year, where most annual town meeting dollars wouldn't be effective until the July 1. So we'll get there. I'll have Ms. Watson and I will sit down and number the warrant. At this point, it's 25 or 26 articles, probably the smallest warrant we've seen in quite a period of time. So I think what you will see at the next meeting will be a 95% product with town council commentary included. If there are any required, it'd be pretty straightforward stuff. So the hope would be to open the warrant and substantially approve it at that meeting. But there isn't anything out there that's of major, that'll be a major surprise.
I have a question on the Special Ed Reserve Fund, which is fantastic, and it's great that we have it. At what point do we stop filling the reserve fund? And I cannot remember, so please refresh my memory as to how you would get money out that would not be for special ed, or you just cut off adding money to it. It stays in the reserve. It always stays in the special ed reserve fund.
It's dedicated for that purpose.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted, somebody asked me today.
Yeah,
and I said, I believe it stays there, but when we get to a certain level, you don't just keep.
No, there's actually the financial reserve policies are, I find that our financial reserve policies are very sophisticated. They step through the use of all of our reserve funds and what happens when we reach certain minimums of those reserve funds. As it relates to the special education reserve fund, it was established with a transfer of $750,000 from free cash. I'm going to try to recall the exact use, but in any 1 year, you can have a maximum of, I believe, $250,000 in spending, but any 2 years, no more than $400,000. So it really was designed so that the Special Education Reserve Fund, even with the initial appropriation, would last at least 3 fiscal years, as there was some intent that the school department would then have to plan for any exceptions or anomalies relative to special education. It also requires an approval not only of the Finance Committee, but the Board of Selectmen to identify the expenditures requested to be covered are true, they were unforeseen. The reserve fund was established to address costs that would be unforeseen. So at some point, the school superintendent will have to come to the Board of Selectmen and sort of lay that out. I can tell you again, the communication has always been strong, as you know, with the various superintendents, and certainly has not wavered with Ms. Price and myself and my staff. So I think what you'll see makes perfect sense. But at this point, the original allotment was $750,000, and at some point in the future, we'll have to address whether or not additional funding would be required.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right.
Motion adjourned.
Hold on. All right, so before we do that, our next meeting is tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night?
March 8th at 6 o'clock, right here, 6 PM, Dawn. 6 PM
Right here,
I
Dawn.
just want to make sure we all know
Stacy
that.
gonna make it?
I can't answer that
She will
question.
be here, she promises.
Okay,
Oh, God.
so I'll now hear a motion for adjournment.
Just is.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.